All right, welcome back. If you've seen the first 3 episodes, if you're new, appreciate you guys. If you're checking in on YouTube, Facebook, that's why I'm looking at the camera. If you're listening to the podcast, appreciate you all as well, of course. This is Center Court. I'm Coach Dakota Webb, checking in with Coach Worley today. Coach, could you introduce yourself, give the audience, let's just assume they're not from Southwest Missouri. They have no idea who you are. Give them a little bit of background, if you would. Help me out.
Yeah, you bet. I'm Ryan Worley. I'm currently the head boys basketball coach at New Covenant Academy. Before that, I was at College of the Ozarks as an assistant for a couple years.
Right.
And that's going back into that role after stepping away from it previously. Started off as a student assistant at Parkview High School,
Okay.
5A program here in town, and worked with Coach Shepard and Coach Rippey there. And then after...
And that was your very first job?
That was my first... Actually, my first job was... C-Teen girls coach at Pershing Middle School at the age of 21. And it was technically probably the D team because we only played every other game. But it was a great experience. Wasn't sure what I was going to get into, what I was going to do when I was 21 until that first practice, and just fell in love with coaching.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and very fortunate and blessed that the path was kind of laid out to me because of the people I worked with had other people that they knew. And through my time at Pershing, was able to step over to the boys program as an assistant. Through that, met Coach Rippey, who was the freshman coach at Parkview.
Okay.
And helped him out and was the B team coach there. And from there, met Coach Shepard, who was the head coach. He was in his last year at Parkview.
Okay.
And through that, met him. He leaves to go to Evangel. And after leaving for Evangel, Coach Rippey takes over the program at Parkview, and I stay on as a varsity assistant for another 4 years.
Wow.
So around 2002, still kind of working through school, part-time, kind of figuring it out, but just know what I want to do, just got to figure out how to get there. Gaining great experience, getting to know a lot of people in the area with coaching. Well, then Coach Shepard, Evangel wins the national championship that year, and Coach Shepard, Coach Waller at C of O, College of the Ozarks, retires, and Coach Shepard ends up taking over. And through that connection that I had made through him previously, knowing that they use student assistants, knowing that I'm trying to figure out how to pay for school, it was the perfect blend.
Right.
Getting a non-traditional guy that's a little older for a student assistant, and then for me to go down and gain valuable experience at the college level. So I ended up enjoying that position so much that I stayed for about 9 more years. Not always a student assistant.
Yeah, after you graduated and got
graduating around 2005, another 3 years, 4 years there, and then staying on as a volunteer assistant for a couple years, working part-time at Branson at the public schools.
Okay.
And then from there, just kind of Coach Rippey ended up taking over at Kickapoo and still having that connection. I've been very fortunate. The guys that I've worked for have only been 2 guys.
That is kind of rare, actually.
Yeah. Coach Shepard and Coach Rippey have been
two
my
very
2 guys.
good guys to assist as well.
Yeah, they've been way more than just colleagues and guys I've worked with. I mean, they've impacted my life in huge ways that I can't even measure.
Right. Well, I mean, when you assist somebody, you just have so much interaction with them too. Like you better have a good relationship with each other, otherwise it's going to be flawed.
Right. I mean, it's family. I mean, you're working with guys that you spend a ton of time with, especially at the higher levels you go, because you're on the road together, you're recruiting together, you're staying in hotels.
See them
sometimes
more than
you're
your family.
And you're getting on each other's nerves sometimes, like family. So it was an amazing experience, and these guys are still my best friends and guys that I just talked to Coach Shepard for about an hour yesterday on the phone, and still talk to Coach Rippey often. And I ended up from there getting the bug to want to be a head coach. Okay. And it was around that time that Coach Poyser at Sparta had retired from the coaching part, and he had called me and we talked, and I ended up taking the head boys basketball job there for a year. Had great experience, loved amazing kids. I mean, you're learning to build a program at a 2A, a Class 2 program where you're junior high through high school, and so you're doing it your way. My wife's a principal in Branson, so the appeal to get back to the Tri-Lakes area kind of was always there. And then the Hollister job came open after a year at Sparta.
Right. So you wanted to get down closer to, without having to relocate your whole family or do the commute. That makes sense.
And so that opportunity, and they had a really talented team that year coming back, and took that job and was there for 3 years. and had a great experience. Again, now you're taking another step up, and you're not the junior high coach, but you're now in charge of your junior high coaches and running an entire program from top down. And really enjoyed that experience. Had great administrators, great kids. But the opportunity to go back to C of O came up again, and so I did, and went back for a couple years, and then this opportunity at New Covenant. Still just had the bug to be a head coach, to run my own program, but wanted to be patient and wait for the right place.
I think that's fair too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, as with anything in life, if you force it, who knows how it turns out. You might not be all in on it, sort of situation. So you had 2 stints at C of O, right? Can you tell me, obviously an assistant coach at the college level, you're called upon, especially at a smaller college, you're called upon to do an awful lot just to support the head coach, right? And you just mentioned, like, at Hollister, you had to delegate, you had to, like, manage a staff, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, at the next level, it's even more so. Like, Coach Shepard really relies on yourself and whoever else is on his staff. What were your roles there, or like what did Coach Shepard look to get from you specifically?
Well, and that was the great thing. He challenged me from day one with things that I was probably uncomfortable with doing, that I wasn't completely prepared, but he knew that I could handle. I just needed that guidance for it. Just a simple thing, like when I first got there, it was I was in charge of film exchange and scouting reports, kind of. And so it was interesting because at that time, it was back when it wasn't as easy as getting on your computer, logging into a program and just looking and watching video on somebody like it is now. I needed to contact about 5 schools for every opponent we had on the schedule and try to get at least 2 of them to send me film. And some days it was, 2 days before, and the next day FedEx.
Was that like direct mail then?
Yeah, it was a FedEx. Usually we had a FedEx number. I had it memorized.
That's crazy.
I would call the assistants for whoever it was and say, here's our FedEx number, and who can I give you? And I had to be, what it really taught me, though, was organization.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, here's who I got coming on this one, and that's still 2 months away.
Yeah.
And I needed to know, but also I needed to know that who I needed to make sure I got games to afterwards. So I really learned to be organized at that time with what we were trying to get done. And when he would ask me, hey, who do you got coming on this one, I was able to right there pull it up and look and have that available. And that was probably the most valuable thing I learned with that. And as I grew in that role, the roles continued. He just continued to add on to it. I felt like the next big step for me was trying to get heavily involved in the recruiting process with kids. Just getting out and watching and evaluating. Probably not as much with the relationship stuff. It was just more of, hey, Coach, I saw this kid, and then Coach would go and watch him, and he would get an idea, and then he was really good at the relationship part. But then eventually that grew into, now you're building the relationships. You're making the phone calls. You're writing the letters some on top of Coach Shepard doing it. And then when I left, I feel like I probably took a bigger step in the understanding of how to prepare for an opponent, organize your practice plans, have a plan in place that's not just 2 days out. So when we would come back, Coach was a little more with, let's talk about practice. And here, this year you've got the offense.
And this was your second stint?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was, now you're kind of the offensive coordinator.
Okay.
I'll do the defense. And, everything obviously would be running through him. I would have meetings with him, but then when it was practice time, I made sure we had the plan ready and prepared, and he gave me a ton of responsibility. And we would usually break down every other opponent with scouting reports. Yeah. Made it lighten for both of us, not to just do one. And then this year, going into this last season, we actually just flipped roles. He's like, you've got the defense this year, I'll take the offense, just so we continue to grow and not get stagnant in what we're doing.
I think that makes sense, though. I mean, that's wise, right? Yeah. Kind of like always have fresh eyes on it and challenge like what we're doing, auditing what we're doing, making sure it still makes sense.
Yeah.
Whenever you would go on the road and evaluate talent, and you were, thrust into that recruiting role, did you find yourself drawing on or looking back now, hindsight being 2020, could you find yourself drawing on the scouting teams and looking ahead on the schedule? I mean, obviously that's the difference in you're watching a college program, scouting them versus watching a high school player. But do you think there's some overlap there?
Absolutely. You see programs where you're wanting to get your program to, and you see the caliber of player and the type of players they are. So when you go and watch, you're like, does this guy help me? Does he help us get to that level?
So it's like problem solving.
Right.
plugging the holes basically.
Absolutely. And then when you start to get those caliber of players in a class, then it becomes, what do we need to fill the next hole that we didn't get, and what do you need after that that's going to replace it. And
what were your guys' non-negotiables? So I mean, I know like year to year it's probably going to vary based on like who, like as far as what holes you need to plug.
Right.
But what were your non-negotiables regardless?
Well, I think first and foremost is having high character kids. I mean, just kids that were responsible, and you knew through doing some background work that they were going to be able to be responsible enough to take care of business day in and day out. But it's always kind of even then it's the college level is very demanding.
Oh yeah, it's basically like a job.
It is.
And at hard work you have a little extra.
Yeah, you got a little extra, and it was probably even more so at C of O, and even for Coach Shepard when he was at Evangel, you're looking for kids that are going to be a great fit in the culture of the school first,
right?
And then are they going to be able to handle the academics, and then after the academics, are they going to be able to handle what we're throwing at them basketball wise? And there's always turnover. I mean, I think you look at every program and you see kids they'll come in and then they decide, this is a lot, and maybe they decide it's not for them, or for whatever reason, or they look to transfer for whatever reason. I think part of that is the society nowadays a little bit too, is when it gets a little bit tough, I look for the next thing. But I think
that's fair.
Yeah, but I don't want to say that it's any different now, that I was any different when I was that age as compared to today's kid. I think that's not fair to them. That is teaching kids how to handle adversity, and yes, it's tough right now, but you're going to get through it.
Of course, yeah.
And I've experienced that now going back to the high school level. Just you put some high pressure and demands on kids, and they want to first and foremost, I'm not sure, and they question it. They're going to. That's natural.
Yeah, I think, and it's probably healthy to a degree.
Yeah.
Too, because at that point they're involved in the decision,
right,
rather than the decision being made for them. Right. Like, hey, this is a conscious choice to buy into what you're being asked to do or to not buy in.
Right.
Right. With choices come consequences, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's fair to put kids in that position, right? Especially in the right environment. You don't want to just like, as you get younger and younger, you don't want to just throw them to the wolves.
Right.
Obviously, they need guidance, but I don't think it's irresponsible or asking too much to do that either. At the same time.
Right, I agree. Right. Yeah, I think for one, you're I don't want to say testing the commitment level, but you're definitely finding out, which kids are really dedicated or committed to wanting to push themselves. Yeah. Are they intrinsically motivated? Do they need you to do it? And then when you start to do it, how do they respond to it? And is it going to be something where can they handle the adversity? And when I say adversity, it's just the challenges maybe you're throwing at them physically for the practice as compared to what they've done in the past. The thinking through the game, the way you're challenging them to think about the game as compared to, hey, we're just going to throw it up and go play.
Right. Kind of switching gears, your second stint at C of O, whenever you were called upon to do like the offensive X's and O's or the defensive X's and O's, could we dive a little deeper into that? Because I want to share this with coaches and kind of give them some behind the scenes. And I'm sure, I've talked to Coach Shepard. He's always been super open. So I'm kind of curious what it was you guys emphasized on both sides of the ball, and then how you address that.
Well, I think offensively first, we always set some goals that we wanted to meet each and every game, and for one is limiting turnovers. We set some percentage that we wanted to shoot from certain games, like whether it was 35% from three, obviously over 75% from the free throw line. I mean, when you set those kind of goals that that you're going to value, then first and foremost, when you don't meet those goals, then you're able to back it up and, okay, why didn't we?
Right.
Maybe it's shot selection.
Like a measuring stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, then, okay, we need to work on this. We need to address this. We need to watch film over this. But I think we would really stress as far as offensively, valuing the ball, not turning it over.
Okay.
Right shot, right person, right time.
Okay.
Now, the high school level is obviously a lot different than the college level when you got the shot clock involved.
Of course.
But you still, at the high school or college level, you still want the right guys taking the right shots at the right time from the right spots. It's something else we've said. It's. But then I think it's outside of those things. Are you giving yourself the best chance to score in the right places on the floor? And the one thing I love about the system we ran at C of O, it was very interchangeable. Kind of fits into the modern game a little bit of what you want to call small ball. Everybody has the ability to step out, shoot.
Well, you guys never did really have anybody to recruit that was like a quote unquote big, right? Like
and sometimes even when we did, you would find out that it would kind of clog that. It would,
of course,
it was a struggle sometimes. Now we had some bigs that, and we just try to simplify it for them. If they were go block to block, post up, we would do a lot of actions where we would throw it into the post and then work out of that with skip outs or kick outs or what we called punch screens, which was the kind of the Golden State center screen action where they would they run out off of Draymond and then they'll bring Curry or somebody off of that.
So you're setting that like perimeter screen for the shooter and then slipping to the basket, right? And then you've got the dump off from the big or the kick out to the shooter, whichever one opens up. That makes sense to me. What did you guys do? I know sometimes like shot selection it's one of those gray things to teach, right? Like it can be tricky. We can teach shooting mechanics. We can teach, this part of the offense or that part of the offense. But the shot selection, I know you guys measured it with field goal percentage, and that was a good barometer of being like, hey, low field goal percentage, indicative of us not taking great shots perhaps. Did you guys have any quick hitters or like things you would just go to though? Like say you had a few possessions that you didn't care for. Okay, we need to get this dude a shot here to try to control the offense without losing our flow.
Yeah, I think we did. We always had a couple things we'd want to go to. We usually had, we probably had about 5 things.
Okay.
And honestly, my first year back, we had a lot more than that. I kind of came in with
kind of whittled
stuff,
it down.
Yeah. Coach was like, "Hey, put together this," and I ended up putting together kind of a playbook that was very similar. I got it from Fred Hoiberg when he was at Chicago, and he called it pitch.
Yes.
And we called it flip.
Okay.
And it was just a lot of quick handoff actions that would end up in certain actions at the end.
Like basically like stacking 2 actions back to back with a handoff into a ball screen or a pin down into a handoff. Yep. Is that kind of what it was?
That is, yeah. And usually we had some that would end in a, like we said, that kind of that center screen punch action, but you disguise it with some false motion if you want to,
of course, with
all the pitch actions and movement.
Right. I love that playbook, to be honest.
Yeah, this is going to be the first year. I tried to put it in a while back at the high school level. I'm going to look to do it again this year a little bit.
I really think more teams should.
Yeah.
I've said that to a lot of high school coaches, and I'm sure nobody will.
Kids, what I love about it is when you try to teach something, kids will struggle maybe to see the concept, but now you have something to go pull up on YouTube,
of course,
and show it to them.
I'm sure that's helpful.
It is, and I've had actions where we've done things and kids will struggle to get the pace of it and understand how it's supposed to kind of look.
Right.
And then you just next film session, all of a sudden you pull it up and you say, "Hey, this is what we're looking for out of the." The flip angle.
Of course.
And then they see it, so they're able to go out now and execute that a little bit better.
Yeah, I know, and I don't think I'm giving away too much, so he shouldn't mind. But I know Coach Schweitzer down at Ozark, like I've been working with them this preseason, and he was telling me that his intention was to, they've always, in my opinion, I think they're one of the better teams in the area at having some sort of system, right? And like, they seem to always play well as a unit regardless of the talent on the floor.
Yeah.
And of course it's Ozark, so they have some talent.
Right.
But I think he's wanting to be more intentional with that shot selection this season. He was saying like, nothing's changing as far as the system, but having a series of quick hitters that they cross the timeline and get into, right?
Yeah.
Now, what those are, whatever, but it's the same idea, right? Like, hey, we can kind of help teach shot selection just by putting them in spots on the floor that, from there, we hope the decision making takes over and the reps that we've done, are conducive to making good decisions.
Right.
But at least they're in a place where they have an advantage of sorts.
Yeah, and you're constantly having conversations about roles. I mean, even if you got these quick hitters in, constantly having the conversation. And the greatest teacher of role is playing time sometimes. And then it's unfortunate, that you're not feeling like you want to punish a kid, but
it makes sense, though. The game is the biggest teacher, right? And, like, if you're not playing the game, that's also a teacher.
I want to play, so I recognize maybe I don't need to shoot as many threes a game, and or I need it. Sometimes, honestly, it's backwards. I've had kids that are so unselfish.
Like reluctant.
Yeah, because they buy into what you're teaching about the team game and sharing the ball and ball movement that they pass up shots. Yeah. And you've got to tell them, we need you to score. We need you to look for that. And that's when that's a good problem to have.
It's an easier problem to deal with, right? What about the defensive side of things? How did you guys attack the defensive side?
We've really adopted the pack line defensive mentality down there. My first year back at C of O, I've always been a big Tony Bennett fan.
Okay.
And what they've done even when he was at Washington State, and then have always been a Virginia fan. Not always. Once he took over,
of course,
really watched Virginia and their style of play. I love the mover blocker offense. He's got some great quick hitters himself. I think he does. His court demeanor and his sideline demeanor is just
and even just like his off the court demeanor. I mean, he's probably a top 5 coach in the game. Yeah. I think that's comfortable to say at the college level.
Agree. Yeah. And I think it's starting to come to light now to everybody else, not just from a national championship.
The nice thing about social media is we get a few more clips behind the scenes, and we're like, this guy can coach.
Well, and what's to lead into that? That's when before he was national championship coach, even Final Four, 1 seeds, I emailed their staff.
Okay.
And I just said, hey, we're looking at doing this. Love your defensive stuff. Been watching a lot. What can you help us with? And kind of gave them a background of where I was at and what we had done. And they emailed me back within a couple weeks and sent us a lot of really good information and some practice video.
That's cool.
With drills.
Yeah.
And we just started implementing that as soon as we could. And we just talk a lot about defensively the things we want to value, which is know your nose. This is something that I carry into where we're at now at New Covenant. We don't know baseline. And I think when you put those guidelines on and you make a mistake or somebody scores, that usually you can revert back to something happened on one of these 7 things that we try to do or not let happen. And if not, then it just means they made a play, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Move on to the next play. Because they're going to score.
Yeah. And I mean, good offense beats good defense eventually. That's really cool, though. I mean, from 2 angles. Like, first of all, I think the best coaches are always willing to reach out to others, right? And always like try to find where they might be able to get some help. You know, we don't know everything. It's the coach that knows everything that like I don't want anything to do with, right? And then them being so open to sharing it too. But I think that's pretty prevalent across coaching.
Yeah, you know I honestly haven't ran into, and I'm a coach. I love studying coaches. Yeah. I mean, I just love, I'll call anybody, I'll bug anybody and try to learn as much as I can about what they're doing. Even if I don't want to do it or won't do it, I want to know what it is. And the biggest thing for me is what do they do, you know, besides the X's and O's, what are they doing to develop their culture? How are they, the relationship part of it, because that's so important with what the true success of a program. It's so much is that part of it. And then I feel like after that, it's going to be no matter where your X's and O's are, is how's your skill development? What are you doing to get guys better? Is it more strength stuff, more shooting? Do you play more? I mean, I've gone by and watched every single college here in town multiple times, and we'll do it again as they get going more now that they're in week 1, week 2. Because we're in the middle of our junior high, actually towards the end of our junior high season. Right. And we're going to have about 2 weeks there before November 4th when the high school season starts. So that time for me will look like hitting about as many college practices as I can. Yeah. And then when I was at the college level, I'd love to go watch high school guys. Okay. The guys in the area that I have a lot of respect for that have had success no matter where they're at, like the John Schaefers and, you know.
And like regardless of level at that point, there's always some sort of takeaway, right? Like we all teach differently in some way or fashion. Or even like you said, you may not want to run this specifically. I think we get too tied to X's and O's and drills sometimes. And it's just great to notice how coaches like problem solve and how they communicate and how they structure practice and where their stance is on conditioning or skill development, etc. Yeah, and like just the more gyms you're in, like that was my big challenge whenever I got back here and I just started coaching up again. And I just started skill development in this market again. And I'm like, I need to be in it. If I'm not training an athlete or coaching a practice or doing a workout, I need to be in a gym. Yeah. Right. Because I think that's where I'm challenged to stretch and grow and notice and like just stay plugged in. You know, and like even now, like between workouts, if I'm not able to get to a gym, I'm watching film, listening to some sort of podcast, you know, what have you, like trying to just kind of keep my brain working. You know
you're constantly growing and learning. If you're not, you're gonna. I mean, you kind of, what is it, adapt or die? In the philosophy, kind of backwards wise with coaching is that you got to continually trying to grow and learn new things. And even if it's not something you're going to implement in your program, let's say you went and have studied somebody and watched them run practice that's just worked on 1-3-1 zone and flex the entire time in practice,
Right.
you're going to run into a team that's going to do those things.
Amen.
And then you're going to be a little more prepared because you have a better understanding of what it is they're doing.
That's a fact. Yes.
And that's my whole goal is you want to get to a point in your season where everything's been taught and it's just building repetition through instincts that they don't have to be out there thinking and they're just reacting and playing the game.
Yeah.
And they have a high level of confidence and they don't play with fear of making a mistake.
Exactly.
And that's really hard to do as a coach sometimes when you're trying to correct. But then all of a sudden now we're in opponents. It's just now staying sharp and preparing for our opponents.
Right.
So whether it's that day we're playing somebody that's getting ready to play somebody that's a flex team, then our shell drill is going to look like flex. It's going to be preparing, developing a habit to where we're ready to play that. And then as soon as that's done, you're moving on to the next thing.
And it's not necessarily changing what you're doing.
Right.
It's just taking what you're good at, being great at it, and making it contextual to who you're about to play.
Right.
Right. And I think there's like I take it as a challenge, and like I said, we're always learning. I don't want to be that coach who thinks I know everything by any means.
Right.
And so I'm always challenging myself on the same token or the flip side of that coin. Whatever conversation I enter, I want to have some sort of context or some sort, like I may not know it in and out, but I want to at least know of it. Right. And then have the humility to ask questions if I really truly am across the table or in a gym with somebody who knows more about that than I do.
Right.
Heck, even if they may not, right? They might know something I don't know. Right. And it's worth asking, or it's worth observing. You know what I mean? I
do, and I think you're walking it right now just by the podcast you're having and the coaches you're talking to. I mean, I think
this is a selfish endeavor.
It's great. I love it. I can sit down and my wife gets a kick out of me because I can sit down and talk basketball and coaching all day, and somebody will catch me out when we're out and about, and it'll be somebody who's been to one of our games and they'll want to talk, and she can't get me to move on because I'm talking basketball and talking coaching. And then even if it's Belichick or these guys that Nick Saban, the guys who build cultures and the way that you want to talk about it, I'll sit and talk basketball or culture or coaching all day.
I mean, that'll apply to whatever the sport, right? That's just team building, leadership, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah. I want to run it back. Like you mentioned, and it stuck with me mostly because of what I'm doing now. But you had mentioned the skill development piece. And I'm also well aware, not just the high school or college like background that you have, but you have a couple of kids that play of your own, right? And then you've got the junior high season going on right now. You've overseen junior high programs in the past. I want to pick your brain a little bit. What have you noticed on the youth side of things, like maybe areas of wanting or things that we could be doing better in youth development?
Well, I think it's first off, I was working a camp with Barry Hinson a long time ago when he was the head coach at Missouri State, and somebody was asking him at that time the and one stuff was becoming really popular. Guys were doing all the
hot sauce and professor.
It was all that stuff, and the guys were sitting around. Honestly, it was a group of us that were working the camps, coaches,
of course,
sitting around complaining about it. Like this is ruining the game and all that stuff. And Hinson had a great point that I really have kind of stuck to. You got a kid having fun, he's got the ball in his hands.
Pretty fair.
I mean, it's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, if they've got a ball in their hand and they're enjoying it, then they're going to be somehow, hopefully, getting better at something. Now, you hope that you're going to be able to apply some of that in a game situation that's a little more.
Well, I do think it's fair though. Like even myself, I catch myself. Even this year, more so than last year, I'm trying to judge a little less.
Yeah.
Just because it may not be the most efficient way, it doesn't mean it's a total loss. Right. And as long as I've gotten to, we're always, like you said, with your playbook, trying to whittle things down. You can't teach, like time is the biggest asset. Right. So we can only teach so much. Well, I've also tried to kind of ascertain my priorities and whittle those down. And at the end of the day, it's two things. It's number one, I want them to walk away having learned something. Number two, I want them to have enjoyed the process.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like my interaction with them and their time in a gym playing basketball was a positive experience. Right. So I think that's very fair. Right. Now I definitely interrupted you. So what were you going to say?
Well, I think so falling back on that, I think it's just the kids, if they're in the gym and they're working at it, now it's a direction of giving them the right things to work on. And I think that the fact that so many kids are coming into the gym, whether it's with yourself or other skill development coaches, they're in the gym, they're getting better.
Exactly.
And I think that's going to just help them, whatever it is they're doing. Sometimes and I think you do an amazing job with what you're doing. You've worked with our kids, you've been over there, and I know that the focus is never, you're not jumping steps. Sometimes I know that if you're not careful, somebody can watch a YouTube video for 30 minutes and then come away with a workout, but the problem is what they just watched isn't applicable for a 7th grader.
Exactly.
He shouldn't be out there doing, a step back 3 crossovers when he hasn't developed the opportunity
James Harden
to catch
has
and
a
shoot.
different skill set than the 5th grader down the street. I agree.
I think if you can build those foundations. Here's what I tell our kids and our parents. Like, I've had multiple conversations. Like, what do we need to work on with our kid? And when we get to the off season, I said, first off, we'll have individual meetings about that, even with all the way down at the junior high level.
Right.
But I think that just the ability to catch and shoot has kind of got lost some with some of the.
I agree.
First off, with the sports centers of the world, and this is what I told our guys last night. I said, you're either one of 3 guys when you watch a game. You're either the sports center guy, which is just watching the highlights. Want to watch games for dunks, want to watch them for great passes.
Or today it's the overtime kid.
Right. And the other thing I told him is you're watching it as just a fan, that's enjoying the game, and you love basketball and you just want to see guys do things, or you're the imitator is what I called it. Because when I was growing up, it was the Michael Jordan. I would watch him go out and imitate Isaiah Thomas, and not the modern day Isaiah Thomas, the older Isaiah Thomas,
the OG
from the Pistons. And watching him and going out and working on whatever move that was, the imitator guy. And then there's the third guy in my mind that's you're watching the game to study it. And that's really hard to get younger kids to do. But I told them, when you get to a point to where you can watch a game once or twice a week and actually break it down and watch it, your IQ is going to increase immensely in the game. Whether or not, if it's just a simple, why did the 5-man get a dunk running straight down the middle of the floor, rim running?
Like, what happened beforehand?
And what happened with the defense? Why did the defense did they
Well,
not?
and honestly, and folks come to me, I have a little bit more freedom, whenever you're doing preseason practices or team practices in season, or the tournaments are rolling around, you have parameters and things you need to check off, right, within the context of a team. And for me, people are coming to me for extra. At the end of the day, it's all extra on top of what their team is doing. And so I've started to really kind of audit that, and I'm like, okay, how can I give them the most value? And that's one part of it. This last summer and this preseason, I've been trying to, not every workout by any means, but about, every 6th or 5th workout, try to do about 10 minutes of film. And it's a focus film. I'll put together a clip, or a series of clips rather, of these stride stop counters and these stride stop finishes, right? Or these defensive rotations whenever it gets kicked to the weak side. Here's what it looks like when a team X's out and triple switches. Here's why they do it, right? And at least, hopefully, selfishly, we're working on that stuff in our workouts. And so I want them to see, the best players in the world do it. And, kind of be like, oh, crap, that is worthwhile. Or, hey, now that I've seen it, it makes a little more sense out of the context of our workout. I've seen it in an actual game. And then my other hope is that they can, like you're saying, take it away and be able to kind of start noticing those things themselves, right? And towards the end of workouts with my high school players, my older guys and girls, I've been really challenging them, challenging myself, because I don't want to control the whole workout anymore. I think everything is way too instructed or drill-led these days. And so I have been at the end trying to have more flow, where we're going up and down, or even in a half-court setting where it's flowing and it's quick and it's not me setting up an exact situation. I just coach the situations that occurred. But inevitably, there's always a kid or 2 or 3 that are off. And I make them stay by me, and I don't tell them what I see. I ask them to tell me what they see. You know what I mean? And then absolutely. I challenge them throughout the workout. Hey, what did you see there? And I'm not perfect at it yet. I still catch myself sometimes, giving them the answer and not asking the question, just being like, hey, I noticed this, and never giving them the chance to be collaborative. But I think when you look at the highest levels, and we're coaching kids, we're not coaching grown men or grown women. at the end of the day, you know. But I think there's something to be said for that collaboration.
Absolutely. I think when you start having your kids in your program start what I say talking the talk.
Yes.
And every program's culture and talk is different. It's what you're stressing, what you're trying to emphasize. If it's for us with motion or with our defense, when you see guys, and I love, and I never want anybody injured, but we've had, like last season, we had an injury for a player of ours who was a starter, and he was a sophomore.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be incredibly valuable for him moving into his junior year as a leader and an understanding of the game. And I've already seen it out of him because he sat by us and he
got the Ben Simmons year, basically.
Yeah, he's like, they didn't guard the handoff right. They didn't hedge on it. They didn't help. They didn't switch it.
That's huge.
They gave up baseline and we helped, but nobody helped the helper. They didn't drop. And so usually when somebody scores, you can most likely, if you really want to nitpick it and micromanage it, you could find where we broke down.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's 2 passes back. But I think sometimes also recognizing that that's part of the game. You're going to make a mistake. It's really hard to guard.
It's like managing mistakes is most of defense.
Right.
Like you're not going to play a perfect defensive possession. In fact, and I'm a broken record. My kids are probably tired of hearing it from me, but I really want our workouts to be messy for that reason. You know, and I try to articulate this to parents as much as I can, because I think it's important that they know as well, because everything that we do can be undone if it's not being reinforced elsewhere. Right. And I'm not going to like lose sleep over it. It is what it is if that does end up being the case. But I try to communicate with everybody in my circle, like, hey, we do everything messy for a reason. I want them to regularly face adversity and have to overcome it, because that is basketball. Right. Like basketball is not a choreographed dance. You know, I mean, it is poetry in motion to like somebody who's a savant or like really loves the game. Right. But that's also kind of fluffy to say that. Right. Like when you really look at basketball, yes, there's patterns, there's actions, there's common occurrences that we can prepare for, but each of them are also unique. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the main skill is being able to win the possession within that mess. Right. I think winning is the skill I'm trying to work on every workout. Yep. Competing. Yeah. And competing. I like to use competing a lot because I don't want them to come away like if they lose, it's a bad thing.
In the end result as compared to the possession by possession process. Yeah. Now, we harp that a lot with our guys. Like each possession has its own life, and you got to try to do your best to win that one possession. And then the process of that and being your best in that possession, knowing that the odds are against you being perfect. You're not going to be perfect. Right. You're going to make a mistake, but how do you handle it? And can you let go of it? Great players have a short-term memory. They forget about the last shot, they forget about the last play, and they move on to the next one. The guys that have a tendency to underachieve for their abilities or talents are sometimes the biggest struggle for them, is because they have too long of a memory. Right. And they let one mistake compound to a next or grow into the next, or coach is going to get upset with me because of this. And that's a fine line as a coach. You don't want to create an environment of fear. You want kids to go ahead and learn and understand it's okay to make mistakes. Right. Move on to the next play. It's too many mistakes or too many games. Bobby Knight had his quote used to be, basketball is a game of mistakes. The team that makes the fewest usually wins. It's fair. It is, yeah. And I think it's a fine line, because the guys that I envy the most, probably coaching wise, are the guys that pump confidence into their guys in terms of they get out there and they play above and beyond. They're great in their role. Right. And they're masters and great in their role. And they play with that confidence and knowing what their role is first, and that they're going to be the best at it at that time. Yeah. And I struggle with that sometimes. And that's something that I know going into this season, I want to focus and do a much better job of. I want guys, I don't want to create it. Last year I had to coach so hard and so much trying to teach our system. Okay. That I created. And it was your first season. Right. First season with a talented group. Right. So you're on that fine line of, we want to start implementing what we're going to be and who we're going to be, what we know is going to let this group be successful. Right. And then they're also talented guys that we want to make plays. Yeah. Because ultimately, I tell our guys all the time, you guys are the ones making plays. Yeah. We control very little in a game besides who plays. Timeout once in a while where we try to make an adjustment, but they're the ones making plays, and it's our job to try to get them prepared for the test. Yes. To build the instincts to be ready for the test. Yeah, at that point, like our preparation, our practices, or in the hallways when you see your kids or whatever it is, like
everything except game day is like, how can we pump confidence? How can we empower? How can we make sure that they are on the same page, yet not playing out of fear?
Right.
Right. Like I've seen some very good coaches with long track records, a lot of wins, people I even respect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But, you know, if you start ripping kids the moment they miss a shot, or if you really overanalyze every single possession and like, hey, we made like 5 passes, we're supposed to make 7, you know,
right.
like little things like that.
Yeah.
And I've been, you know, guilty of it. You know, that really can shatter a kid's confidence.
Yeah, I mean, what kid's afraid to miss a shot, he's probably not going to make the shot.
Yeah.
And if he's thinking about shooting and whether he should shoot
Exactly.
it, he's probably not going to make it.
Well, and I just think like overanalyzing is it's a endemic in and of itself. Like I'm trying to be better this year about when I go to games, whether it's because I have a relationship with the coach, or there's kids I train that are playing, or, you know, so on and so forth. After the game, if it's somebody I have a relationship with, of course I will have made mental notes that whole game, right? I'm not going to give them any of them for 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be my rule this season, because like the only things that should be coming out of my mouth after you just competed for 2 to 3 hours and your coach or your team just had a long talk in the locker room, right? And like competing is emotional.
It is.
The only thing coming out of my mouth should be, you know, I enjoyed watching you. I'm glad I came. I love you. Things of those nature, right? And I think sometimes because, and it's all well-intentioned, like I do know some parents that know a lot about the game, right? Or I know some folks in my position that are very well-meaning, but it's timing, right? And like, if we overanalyze every single game or every single shot, what does that do to the player?
Yeah, it wears on them.
Yeah, it starts wearing on them, and I don't know that we empower them at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like to, at the high school level, as much as I can, as far as a coach can with what we can control, is I like to have our guys ride the bus home.
Yeah.
And it's not because I just like, when I first started doing it, it was because I wanted our guys to have that time together.
Yeah.
And then
I've had some good memories on a bus.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, that's where your bonding happens, you know, some of the goofy stories, whatever, you know, but then as it's grown on its own, I've realized that this is also, like, if we have a tough night, whether it's a positive, good night, great night, bad night, whatever it is, it also gives the parents a chance to go on their own. And for them to not have to get in the car, and I don't even mean this, I would rather them be upset with me and my coaching or whatever is going on and fill their head full of that than approach them about how they played. Yeah. And I try to encourage our parents that when we have our first parent meeting, that's why I do it. Yeah. And that if they do go home with you, or when they do get home, just love on them, puff them up, encourage them, and then don't talk about the game. And then wait until you need an opportunity. And most of the time after a night of sleep, they're not going to feel like having the same conversation anyways. Yeah.
And honestly, like, I couldn't be more grateful to my mom and dad for having done that. Like, I was so in love with the game that, like, and I hate losing probably more than I like to win.
You didn't lose a lot in high school.
Not a lot, but I hate it, right? But I also, like, to me, like, micro losses, like, maybe I didn't play as well as I thought I should have. Or maybe I know my body language wasn't what it was supposed to be, and now I'm upset with myself for that, and it's a spiral. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I couldn't be more grateful. Like, hindsight being 2020, I used to be kind of frustrated. Like, man, I wish my parents wanted to talk to me about how many points I just scored, or like, you know, about the good stuff. And like, the only thing I ever heard from my parents after the game, and it was, you know, I always rode the bus home. But it was like, once I got home, the only thing I ever heard was, "Are you hungry?" Right. You know, glad we got to come watch. It was a good game. And then, you know, "I love you," things of that nature. The only time I ever got any sort of negativity was if my dad really wasn't pleased with how I responded to a ref or to my coach. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then he would let me know. Yeah. But I think that's fair at that point. Like, they did a really good job of keeping the main thing. Right. And the main thing was, I'm not going to be a professional basketball player my entire life. Even if I'm LeBron James, I have to retire at some point.
Yeah, it's going to end for everybody.
I have to go on and be a father, be a husband, be a citizen, you know, community member, like what have you. And I think that is the main thing. And if we always get wrapped up in, man, you know, so-and-so shot didn't look too good tonight, like we gotta hit the Y tomorrow, like it's grind time, we gotta fix this, or man, I can't believe coach, you know, made this decision during the game. Like, you know, filling our kids' head with that stuff just is not helpful.
Yeah, I've always
and I'm not perfect, so I don't want to put people down and
Right.
like judge parent. Like at the end of the day, you can only parent your family. Like
Right.
so, like I'm not thinking of anybody in particular right now, but it is something that I'm noticing at scale. You can see it on Twitter. You can see it after games. Like if you just stand on the wall and just observe, you'll see it.
You know, I tell this story with our junior high this year. We went on we won our first 2 games, played in the conference championships, young team.
Yeah.
And then after that, we lose about 5 in a row, which was, how are you guys going to handle it? And honestly, they've handled it great. They've continued to work at it.
Yeah.
But I think it was harder on some of the parents than it was on the kids.
Hard to watch. Yeah.
So I shared a story with them that my 5-year-old, my middle son, had his first flag football game season.
I saw that.
And he's playing with first graders.
Okay.
And he reminds me of this little Barry Sanders out
Oh,
there,
yeah.
a little guy just weaving in and then and spinning and juking. But the first quarter, he never carried the ball.
Okay.
So as the dad over there, I'm like, wait a minute, I watch practice. I know he should be carrying the ball.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I'm over there and I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's get him carrying the ball. And I'm losing this perspective of the fact that he's absolutely having a blast.
Yeah.
I could have ruined that moment for him because he didn't care if he carried the ball. Right. He was diving in the grass.
But you internalized it. And
then I was a little bit patient, waited, and next thing you know, he is carrying the ball. But then I'm thinking how puffed up and proud I am of the way he's playing. And exactly. I got to remember that the most important thing is that he's having fun.
Yeah.
He's being respectful to his opponents and his teammates, and he's learning to compete. Yep. And everything else will take care of itself. And afterwards, we just say, we don't even talk about the game. You know, I joke with him about, nice job. I saw you do this and this. And he's like, what he wants to talk about is, well, did you see me when I was over on the sideline and I was playing with so-and-so, you know? And I'm like, I right. saw that too. Of course I did, you know.
Having a good time with his buddies.
Yeah, so I think you hit it right on the head with, you know, seeing the big picture and knowing that where the priorities are. And first and foremost that, you know, I hope that we have an NBA player somewhere around here in our midst, but the majority of them are not going to be.
Right.
Even less if they're going to be a college level player. But they need to learn what the life lessons that we're trying to apply first and foremost. And, you know, there's a work ethic that's involved in that, but there's also a fine line of recognizing just step back for the day and come back at it the next day.
Right. And I think that could help with mental health for these young athletes.
Yeah.
So much.
So much is put on them already because of
even I struggled. I didn't have the same, like we had Facebook and I thought I was a big deal with like a couple thousand friends on Facebook. Like it was pre-Twitter and pre-Instagram. But I mean, Twitter was around, but it was like college whenever it was a big deal.
Yeah.
My identity was so wrapped up in basketball that whenever I failed in college, because of my own mistakes, I had the hardest time for years of dealing with that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's still, honestly, there's probably still some, like, I guess today, like some ripple effect. You know what I mean? Yeah. That things I notice, like the way I address things inside my own head, I'm just like, you know, that's not necessarily the healthiest way to look at that. Like, and I just think that we could really start giving them the tools to do that at a younger age.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, like this game is not your identity. This game is a tremendous way to, you know, interact with other human beings. You know, and at the end of the day, we have to be on this planet with other human beings, regardless of whatever the avenue is, right?
Yeah, with our junior high kids, the one thing I ask them continually, almost daily, is, "Are you having fun?"
Yeah,
you know,
and I think that's important.
They struggle to
just checking in with them, right?
Yeah, just, are you having fun? Are you enjoying it still?
And I know there's a coach that I am friends with from Minnesota that is, this year he's got a Google form that his high school kids will fill out each day. And on there will be like, how many hours of sleep did you get? Like, you know, how's school going? How you feeling with your home life? And it's a private thing just between them and the coach. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they'll be able to kind of like have that on a scale where they can hopefully pay attention and at least try to start those conversations. I mean, the physical one-on-ones are still very important, right? But I mean, I think it's good regardless of what it looks like. how you are being proactive about, asking kids if they're having fun, or, checking in on kids with, how things are going off the court. I had somebody that I've trained for a few years now that, they had some very serious stuff off the court that wasn't them directly, but it affected them directly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like that really put it in perspective for me too. I was like, man, like if I never put that kid through another workout, would they know that I love them, and would they know that, to me, they're more than a basketball player? Have I made that clear enough?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we do lose that perspective sometimes. I'm guilty of it. I think I remind myself of it almost every other week, where it hits me like, okay, I'm getting caught up in trying to make sure we got this in or we got that in, and I'm getting really after them in practice, and I'm losing that just the human relationship stuff, and that's more important than anything else we're going to do. And when you and the good thing is that you're self-evaluating that, and you recognize it, and you come back to it.
Yeah.
And then you just coach that way. I mean, I think we all do that because we're trying to put a lot in a little bit of time, trying to get the most and the best out of them that we can in what time we do have. And sometimes if you're not careful, you can lose the focus of what's the most important, which is the human aspect of it.
At the end of the day, we're only human.
Right.
I know you got a game tonight, so I don't want to keep you much longer. To wrap this up, myself being a young coach, I already know from the, I published the first episode the other day. This is episode 4, so, we've got a couple weeks for this one comes out.
Yeah.
But I already know there's some young coaches who've reached out to me about the first episode. And so if you were giving me advice, or another young coach that might look like myself, just maybe a little less handsome, what would you tell them, or what would you tell myself, like some advice from your coaching career that we could apply?
Well, I think just there's going to be hills and valleys there. I mean, there really are. There's going to be times where there's some seasons that are just going to be a little bit tougher than others, whether you measure it by the wins or the losses, or the way the kids are, your participation numbers, or whatever it might be. But to just stay encouraged, to just make sure that you're continually focused on the relationship building, the fundamentals of the game, and continually doing that. And then making decisions that you feel like are the right decisions for each and every athlete.
Okay.
It never falls back on the playing time or that thing. You're doing what's best for each one on their own that you can.
Okay.
And then just trying to get connected as much as you could, or can. Get out to as many practices as you can. Talk to as many people as you can about the game. It's always a hard thing for me to give advice, because I'm wired different for a lot of guys, I think. To me, for the longest time, I've only been married for 7 years, so to me it was just basketball. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. Besides that, I got a late start at that point. The basketball stuff was all I did, and that was what I dove into, and I didn't know anything else, and I was okay with that. I didn't have a lot of hobbies, right? And still don't. Besides, my family's not a hobby, but if I have free time, it's with them. Yeah. I don't golf anymore because I don't have time. I can't wait for them to get older to where they can go golfing with me, so I can. But I would encourage to, first and foremost, is just to continue the relationship part is just so important. Okay. Whether it's a skills coach like yourself, whether it's a physical trainer, and I've heard Drew Hanlon talk about this before, where most of the time when a guy's in a shooting slump, it's got nothing to do with the basketball part. It's something going on, and you need to make sure you're staying up to that and know that, and that's got to be a priority first and foremost. And it does come back to the old saying of, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Yeah. And when they know that you care, it's got to be more than care. They know that you love them. They know that you're there for them. You've got your back. And when they do, then the rest of the stuff will kind of take care of itself, and then just continually want to grow. Like you can't know enough, whether it's leadership, culture, learning from a CEO about how he runs his business, because if you want your own program, you're going to be running it's the same type of stuff. And then just remember to serve. First and foremost, you're there to serve. Amen. It's it's not about you. You're there to serve.
Awesome. That's perfect, Coach. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.